Hey everyone! Glad you're here, Plants, because history shows that not everyone trusted with a kingdom should have been trusted with sharp objects.
History loves to glorify rulers, but half of them shouldn't have been trusted with a toaster, let alone a kingdom. 1. Emperor Nero. The original arson influencer Rome burned, and Nero allegedly played the liar like it was open mic night at the apocalypse. He fancied himself a performer, not an emperor, a man who once took the stage in singing contests where the audience wasn't allowed to leave until he was done. Imagine your boss forcing you to cheer through a 4-hour karaoke set about himself. When the Great Fire of Rome reduced the city to ashes, Nero blamed Christians, built himself a golden palace, and hosted dinner parties surrounded by burning human torches. The guy treated governing like improv theater with extra pyrotechnics. If TikTok had existed, Nero would have live-streamed the flames with the caption, "Vibes only, Rome's gone, but the playlist slaps." 2. King Charles VI of France, the man who thought he was made of glass. Charles VI ruled France during one of its most chaotic centuries, and somehow made it worse by believing he was literally made of glass. He refused to let anyone touch him, wore reinforced clothing to prevent shattering, and occasionally sprinted through palaces in paranoid fits, convinced assassins were after his fragile body. His courtiers had to gently chase their transparent monarch through corridors while pretending this was totally fine. The man spent more time wrapped in cushions than ruling a country. Diplomats would arrive to negotiate peace, and the king would be hiding in a corner yelling, "Don't bump me!" France wasn't just broken politically. It was led by a man convinced he was one bad hug away from turning into confetti. 3. Emperor Zhu Hozhao, China's prankster-in-chief. While most emperors focused on taxes or armies, Zhu Hozhao of the Ming Dynasty focused on cosplay and chaos. He built an entire fake marketplace inside the Forbidden City so he could pretend to be a shopkeeper, selling imaginary goods to confused servants. He once created an alter ego named General Zhu, then led military campaigns against his own empire for fun. The Emperor of China literally staged wars with himself. When his advisors begged him to act like a ruler, he responded by dressing up as a commoner and riding his pet tiger through the royal gardens. Zhu Hozhao's reign proved absolute power doesn't always corrupt absolutely. Sometimes it just gives you an unlimited budget for bad improv. 4. Sultan Ibrahim Murder. The Ottoman Empire's feathered disaster. Sultan Ibrahim didn't rule the Ottoman Empire so much as he emotionally roller-coastered through it. Nicknamed Ibrahim the Mad, he spent his reign making every royal whim sound like a cry for help wrapped in gold. He once ordered his palace carpets covered in sable fur because he liked the texture of luxury. He then tossed an entire harem of 280 concubines into the Bosporus because one allegedly looked at another man. His economic policy? Melted coins to make glitter for his robes. The man was a one-person recession wearing perfume strong enough to knock out a small army. His obsession with opulence reached its peak when he ordered the palace cats to wear diamond collars. Meanwhile, the empire's treasury was emptier than a broken vending machine. Eventually, the court decided they couldn't afford any more royal mood swings and quietly replaced him. Historians call him eccentric, but really, Ibrahim was just proof that absolute power plus unlimited credit is the world's most dangerous shopping spree. 5. Peter III of Russia, the emperor who worshipped his enemy. Peter III ruled Russia for just 6 months, but he managed to make every one of them historically awkward. Obsessed with Prussia, Russia's enemy at the time, he filled his palace with portraits of Frederick the Great and forced his soldiers to wear Prussian uniforms. Mid-war, imagine the US president switching to the opposing team's jersey during the Super Bowl and asking the crowd to clap. Peter also declared war on Denmark, not for politics, but because they insulted his pet dog. His nights were spent playing toy soldiers and making speeches to his porcelain collection. His wife, Catherine, eventually overthrew him, probably after realizing her husband's biggest military strategy involved action figures. Peter's reign was so brief and bizarre that historians still debate whether he was an idiot, a visionary, or just a man who loved cosplay too much. Either way, he proved there's a fine line between admiration and treason, and he marched across it in full uniform, saluting himself. 6. Queen Ranavalona I of Madagascar, the Isolation Queen. Ranavalona didn't just rule Madagascar, she quarantined it from reality. Her 3-decade reign turned the island into a real-life dystopian experiment in paranoia and survival. Terrified of foreign influence, she banned missionaries, executions became daily entertainment, and anyone who sneezed suspiciously near her could end up testing their faith by walking over red-hot spears. She called it justice. Everyone else called it insanity with better branding. Rana Valona built traps around her palace to catch spies, which mostly caught unlucky servants, and she made nobles run barefoot marathons carrying her through jungles because horses were too impersonal. Yet somehow her isolation kept Madagascar independent for 33 years, the historical equivalent of surviving a zombie apocalypse through sheer stubbornness. When she finally died, the entire island reportedly threw a week-long party. Historians call her ruthless, but let's be honest. She was just the world's most extreme introvert, proving that absolute power and social anxiety are a terrifying mix. 7. Emperor Caligula. The man who tried to appoint a horse-to-government Caligula didn't just break the mold of Roman leadership. He melted it down, snorted the fumes, and declared himself a god. His reign began with promise, then rapidly turned into a 3-year fever dream. He built golden statues of himself, made senators run beside his chariot like personal trainers, and hosted banquets where he'd randomly accuse guests of treason mid-dessert. His favorite hobby was bankrupting Rome to fund circus-level stunts, like constructing a floating bridge across the Bay of Baiae just so he could gallop his horse, Incitatus, across it, wearing armor made of pearls. The same horse he later planned to make a consul. Caligula's logic seemed simple. If humans can't govern properly, maybe try livestock. By the time his guards assassinated him, the empire was a mix of terror, confusion, and possibly neighing. Rome didn't just lose an emperor, it lost its most committed performance artist. 8. King Ludwig II of Bavaria, the fairy tale fugitive. If Disney had been an actual person, it would have been Ludwig II, minus the sense of reality. Obsessed with fantasy, Ludwig spent his reign draining Bavaria's treasury on castles straight out of hallucinations. Neuschwanstein Castle? His personal fan fiction palace dedicated to composer Richard Wagner, who didn't even like him that much. He hosted dinners for imaginary guests, ate alone surrounded by mirrors, and spoke to paintings for advice. When ministers warned him the country was broke, he built another castle to think about it. His people called him the Moon King, not because he was dreamy, but because he mostly came out at night to avoid socializing. Eventually, the government declared him insane, a bold move considering he was technically their boss. Days later, Ludwig mysteriously drowned in a lake, a poetic ending for a ruler who lived entirely in a fantasy world that couldn't quite float. 9. Pope Stephen VI, the one who put a corpse on trial. You'd think the Catholic Church would draw the line at corpse-based litigation, but Stephen VI didn't get the memo. In 897 AD, he ordered the Cadaver Synod, yes, a real event, where he dug up the body of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, dressed it in papal robes, and literally put it on trial for lying about being pope. A decomposing witness stand, a judge yelling at a skeleton. It was courtroom drama meets horror movie. The corpse was found guilty, stripped of its holy garments, and tossed in the Tiber River, proving even the afterlife had no job security in medieval Rome. The stunt horrified the public so much they revolted, arrested Stephen, and strangled him in prison. So technically, 2 popes lost their lives over one argument. The Cadaver Synod remains one of history's most grotesque examples of petty revenge, proof that politics can rot faster than the politicians themselves. 10. Emperor Justin II, the man who bit furniture instead of enemies. When Justin II inherited the Byzantine throne, he also inherited his uncle's chronic insecurity, and then he upgraded it into full-blown madness. At first, he tried to follow in Justinian's footsteps, but governing proved more stressful than anticipated. He began hearing voices, holding full conversations with invisible advisors, and attacking courtiers who looked at him too confidently. Soon he was biting people, and not metaphorically. He'd literally lunge at servants mid-sentence. When they stopped coming near him, he redirected his aggression toward inanimate objects. Chairs, tables, anything within jaw range became fair game. The Emperor of Byzantium, a man once tasked with defending an empire, spent his final years gnawing on furniture like an angry beaver in royal robes. Eventually, his wife brought in an organ player to calm him down, which worked briefly, until he decided the organ was plotting against him too. They say power corrupts, but in Justin's case, it apparently also came with splinters. 11. King Henry VIII, the divorce speedrunner. England's most infamous monarch treated marriage like a subscription service that kept auto-renewing. Henry VIII went through 6 wives with the enthusiasm of someone trying to find the right mattress. When the Pope refused to grant him a divorce from Catherine of Aragon, Henry simply started his own church, the world's pettiest breakup move. From there, it was a blood-soaked dating history. 1 divorced, 2 beheaded, 1 died, another divorced, 1 survived. His pursuit of a male heir destroyed monasteries, bankrupted the treasury, and rewrote religion, all because Tinder didn't exist yet. Henry ballooned in weight, wore armor that needed a pulley system, and allegedly had a special staff to move him around the palace. By the end, England had more ex-queens than functioning alliances. Historians call him a reformer. Realistically, he was just the first man to ruin a country over text message-level relationship drama. 12. Emperor Bokassa I of the Central African Empire, the dictator who crowned himself. Napoleon 2.0, Jean Bedel. Bokassa didn't want to be president. He wanted to be legendary. In 1977, he spent 1/3 of his nation's budget throwing himself a coronation that made Versailles look like a potluck. He rode through the capital in a golden carriage pulled by 8 horses, wearing a velvet cape so heavy it needed attendants to carry it. He crowned himself emperor with a diamond-studded laurel wreath, a direct homage to Napoleon, except Napoleon at least had victories to justify the theatrics. Bokassa's empire was basically a broke dictatorship decorated like a costume party. The French, who funded half of it, pretended to applaud while quietly calculating the refund. His reign ended when France literally flew in paratroopers to remove him, proving the quickest way to lose power is to cosplay as history's greatest conqueror while your people can't afford bread. Bokassa didn't just rule poorly, he ruled like a man auditioning for Les Miserables, the dictator's cut. 13. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the guy who tried to banish death with mercury. Qin Shi Huang unified China, built the Great Wall, and then spent the rest of his life terrified of dying, which, ironically, killed him. Obsessed with immortality, he sent expeditions across Asia searching for an elixir of life. When they failed, his alchemists offered a new solution: drink mercury. He agreed. The first emperor of China, builder of one of humanity's grandest civilizations, was slowly poisoning himself to live forever. His paranoia grew so extreme that he started traveling in disguise, convinced assassins lurked behind every curtain. He even ordered the construction of his afterlife backup plan, the Terracotta Army, thousands of clay soldiers ready to defend him in death. When he finally died from his immortality medicine, the empire erupted in chaos. It's poetic, really. The man who conquered death ended up preserved in history's biggest tomb, surrounded by clay proof that eternal life isn't all it's cracked up to be. 14. Emperor Ferdinand I of Austria, the ruler who banned pears. Ferdinand I ruled Austria during the 19th century, technically. In practice, he was more of a royal mascot than a monarch. Born with severe epilepsy and developmental issues, he spent much of his reign shouting his favorite sentence: "I am the emperor, and I want dumplings." Court officials kept him away from politics, letting him sign whatever papers they placed in front of him, as long as he got his snacks. His most famous moment came when someone offered him pears, which he despised. He declared with royal fury, "I am the emperor, and I forbid pears." It instantly became official policy because no one dared question him. For months, Austrian markets couldn't sell pears without risking treason. When revolution broke out in 1848, Ferdinand calmly abdicated, mostly because it meant fewer meetings. Historians describe him as harmless, but his reign proved a single royal tantrum could rewrite fruit law. Somewhere in Vienna, a confused grocer probably asked, "Wait, we just banned pears?" And everyone nodded like it made perfect sense. 15. Emperor Norton IV, San Francisco's favorite mad monarch. In the mid-1800s, San Francisco crowned itself a king, unofficially but enthusiastically. Joshua Norton, a failed businessman, declared himself Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. Instead of locking him up, the city collectively shrugged and decided, sure, why not? Norton printed his own currency, which local shops actually accepted, and issued royal decrees like dissolving Congress and demanding a bridge across the bay, which, hilariously, got built decades later. The man dined for free wherever he went, inspected police uniforms as a civic duty, and became a beloved local celebrity. When he died, 10,000 people attended his funeral. Norton ruled absolutely no one, commanded no army, and yet achieved what most rulers never could. He made an entire city happy just by pretending to be in charge. His empire ran on kindness, imagination, and unshakable confidence, our proof that sometimes the best monarchy is one built on collective whimsy. 16. Queen Maria the Rye of Portugal, the monarch who laughed herself into madness. Maria I began her reign as Maria the Pious. She ended it as Maria the Mad, and the transformation was tragically bizarre. A devout Catholic, she was obsessed with morality, prayer, and guilt, the holy trinity of self-inflicted stress. When her husband and son died within 2 years, Maria's grief boiled over into religious hysteria. She began laughing uncontrollably at funerals, insisting angels were tickling her. She'd wander her palace at night, singing hymns at full volume, interrupting meetings to scold invisible demons. Diplomats described visiting her court as equal parts mass and madhouse. Her doctors tried everything, from cold baths to exorcisms, but Maria remained joyfully deranged. Eventually, her son ruled in her place, while she spent her days praying, crying, and giggling, sometimes simultaneously. It's one of history's darkest ironies. The queen who tried to purify her soul ended up losing her mind. Still, you have to admit, ruling through divine laughter is a far more entertaining legacy than most monarchs manage. 17. Emperor Paul I of Russia, the man who banned round hats. Paul the Rye didn't hate democracy or freedom as much as he hated circles. When he inherited the Russian throne, he began outlawing anything he personally found irritating, including round hats, because they reminded him of revolutionaries. He also banned waltzing, colorful clothes, and even the word fatherland. His soldiers were forced to wear Prussian-style uniforms so tight they could barely breathe, and punishments were handed out for walking too casually. Paul micromanaged Russia like an obsessive HOA president. His paranoia got so bad that he built a fortress-like palace with hidden escape tunnels, convinced assassins lurked in every shadow. Ironically, his assassins found him there, smothering him with a silk scarf in his own bedroom. His death brought instant national relief. The next day, nobles threw round hats in the streets in celebration. Historians call Paul's rule unstable. That's polite. The man turned fashion policing into government policy and died because no one wanted to live in a country where geometry was a crime. 18. Emperor Ivan IV, the Terrible, the original workplace. Rage. Queen Ivan the Terrible earned his nickname the old-fashioned way, through unfiltered rage and creative violence. As Russia's first official czar, he combined genius-level paranoia with an artistic flair for cruelty. After his beloved wife died, Ivan became convinced everyone was plotting against him, nobles, clergy, possibly his own reflection. He created a private death squad called the Oprichniki, who wore rode black horses and basically turned Moscow into a haunted house. When he got bored of executions, Ivan would just leave. Once, he literally quit ruling, stormed off to the countryside, and told everyone, "Fine, run the empire yourselves." Russia begged him to come back. He did, on the condition that he could kill whoever he wanted. His most famous meltdown came when he struck his own son during an argument and accidentally killed him. Ivan spent the rest of his life haunted by guilt, hallucinations, and the sound of his own legend echoing back, a cautionary tale that absolute power and anger management issues make one hell of a disaster combo. 19. King George III. The monarch who talked to trees America remembers George III as the guy we declared independence from. Britain remembers him as the man who lost both his colonies and his mind. At first, he was perfectly competent, punctual, serious, occasionally dull. Then came the madness. Modern historians think it was a disease called porphyria, but back then, people just assumed he'd gone cosmically bonkers. He'd talk for hours without stopping, argue with invisible ministers, and once shook hands with a tree, calling it the King of Prussia. Courtiers described him as polite but slightly too conversational with furniture. His doctors tried every treatment imaginable: bloodletting, ice baths, and a diet that could make a sane man crazy. Despite the chaos, George had moments of heartbreaking clarity, apologizing to his servants for frightening them. When he finally went blind and deaf, his son took over. Still, Britain loved him for his decency, proving that sometimes being kind while insane beats being sane and cruel. It's ironic, really. America broke free from a mad king, and then spent the next 2 centuries electing people who made him look stable. 20. Emperor Commodus, the gladiator who forgot. He was the emperor. Commodus didn't want to rule Rome. He wanted to headline it. The son of Marcus Aurelius, one One of history's most respected emperors, Commodus grew up surrounded by philosophy, culture, and reason. Naturally, he rejected all of that to become a shirtless showman. He renamed months after himself, charged the treasury for his performances, and insisted on fighting gladiators, who weren't allowed to hit back. Rome's supreme ruler spent his reign cosplaying as Hercules, strutting around the Colosseum in lion skins, bashing straw opponents, and declaring himself a god. The Senate hated it. The people loved it, mostly because admission was free and snacks were plentiful. But when Commodus started naming cities after himself and threatening to rename Rome Commodiana, the patience snapped. His mistress had him strangled in his bath by a wrestler named Narcissus, because poetic irony never takes a day off. Commodus proved that Rome didn't fall overnight. It just slowly drowned in ego, sweat, and really bad theater. 21. Emperor Heliogabalus, the teen who turned Rome into a rave. Heliogabalus became emperor of Rome at 14, which is already a bad start for any civilization. Instead of governing, he treated the empire like a chaotic sleepover with unlimited wine. He replaced senators with dancers, filled fountains with perfume, and threw dinner parties where guests were buried alive in rose petals, romantic in theory, suffocating in practice. His religious reforms included making everyone worship his personal sun god and marrying a Vestal virgin, which was about as illegal as it gets in ancient Rome. He once served guests 600 dishes made of just beans, followed by live animals released into the banquet hall for excitement. His greatest passion was fashion. He reportedly wanted gender reassignment surgery and sought surgeons to help him become a woman. Romans, however, weren't ready for an emperor who mixed drag shows with divine worship. By age 18, the Praetorian Guard had had enough and dumped him in the Tiber River. His reign was short, wild, and somehow still more entertaining than most modern politics. 22. King Charles II of Spain, the inbred king who broke genetics. Charles II wasn't just a royal, he was a full-blown medical warning label. Centuries of Habsburg inbreeding had turned his family tree into a circle, and poor Charles was the final product. He couldn't walk until age 8, drooled constantly, and his jaw was so misaligned he couldn't chew food properly. His subjects called him El Hechizado, the Bewitched, because it seemed impossible that one man could be this cursed without supernatural help. His court tried every cure imaginable, potions, prayers, even sprinkling holy water on his breakfast. Meanwhile, Charles spent his days collecting dwarfs and exorcists, convinced demons lived in his furniture. He never produced an heir, ending 200 years of royal genetics gone wrong. When he died, doctors discovered his body contained nothing inside, probably poetic exaggeration, but spiritually accurate. His death kicked off the War of Spanish Succession, meaning Europe went to war because one man's DNA basically gave up. If ever there was proof that royal purity doesn't mix well with biology, Charles was the final exam. 23. Emperor Faustin IV of Haiti, the general who crowned himself. Napoleon's ghost. After Haiti gained independence, General Faustin Soulouque decided democracy was overrated. In 1849, he crowned himself Emperor Faustin IV, complete with velvet robes, diamond-studded crowns, and a throne that looked suspiciously like a fancy chair from a hotel lobby. Inspired by Napoleon, he demanded the same titles, the same ceremonies, and even the same pose in portraits, though none of the same talent. His palace guards were barefoot, his nobility was made up of old drinking buddies, and his royal decrees often read like to-do lists. To seem intimidating, he surrounded himself with witch doctors and declared himself bulletproof. Spoiler, he wasn't. When revolution came, Faustin fled to Jamaica with as much treasure as he could carry and lived quietly until his death, occasionally telling people he was still emperor on break. Historians call him delusional, but there's something endearing about a man who turned dictatorship into fan fiction. Haiti didn't just lose a ruler, it lost one of history's most confident cosplayers. And there you have it, 23 rulers who proved power tools should come with warning labels, especially for kings.